What's up, guys? How's it going? Congratulations to the unders. You have won. Shout out to everybody, though. Ant-Man in
Saw a
the
lot of
house.
overs in the chat.
There were a lot of overs,
How's everybody doing?
understandably so. But the unders are going to win for tonight. So it was not over the 3 minutes. It's actually under 2 minutes even. I don't know that very many people took that. But shout out to you guys, as always. Make sure to drop a like as well. Help out the stream. And get the reach up on that side. Anthony in the house, as always, with the hat game. Rocking strong there. People are always going to ask this, but do you happen to know, I'm putting you on the spot, but do you happen to know where that hat can be purchased at?
Yes, the Reference Co. is the name of the hat company. They have two different websites. There's Reference Co. and there's Reference Co. Limited. That's usually where like the sports hats are. So right now they have a lot of the Philly Eagles kind of mashups. So there's a lot of good ones there, and you could use the code Philly Special for 15% off. So that's always good to support us. Hopefully I can get Josh a few hats ahead of the draft. Maybe he could rock a few of those. He's been wearing some hats more often. I know he's got a lot better of a head of hair than I do, so he doesn't necessarily have to cover it up. But I don't want to blind too many people that watch the videos and the live streams. So
There you go. So yes, pick yourself up one. I'll try to get maybe some link in the description for people watching this thing back that's not live, but try to get something in there as well. But yeah, probably not a better hat game. I've tried to get a little better, as you've mentioned, so have some recently. But, kind of go with the traditional look, I suppose. Lots of things to get into and cover. Obviously, Eagles news, NFL news, other things, other related items or not. But I guess we should start. Interestingly enough, I maybe just start in the same area that we started for the last stream. It was not planned or expected, but that was about the time where, we got the, oh my gosh, what's going on? There's a Dianna Russini and Mike Vrabel pictures that are coming out, and like, wow, that's definitely doesn't seem like above board. But what else is going on there? Now we have the official resignation, I guess, from Dianna Russini, the Athletic sharing that, or I guess she shared it, and then it kind of getting around to other people for more backstory and things like that. But Dianna Russini resigning from the Athletic, despite them currently still, I guess, under an investigation or to full investigation to get to the bottom of what the case was with her and Mike Vrabel. It's kind of weird, to say the least.
yeah, it was right before I actually jumped on a radio interview earlier today with Green Bay with Marcus Eversole and talking about the Dontayvion Wicks trade and things like that. And I sent you the tweet and I was like, oh, well then, right? Because once last time we got on here, we talked about it. There were people that were upset that we talked about it. There were people that didn't think we were critical enough of Dianna Russini. So it's kind of been on both sides. That's just the day and age that we're in. But regarding it now, right? It's just you're a week ago or so, it seemed like who knows what was going on, right? Like then the Athletic came out, their first statement was like, we fully support Dianna. She's one of the best reporters. She's one of our best. Like we stand behind her reporting, whatever. Then a couple of days went by, the report came out that they were going to start an investigation, or however they worded it. They were going to do some background work and do more digging. Then it was like Dianna Russini sent out that one tweet at like 6:30 in the morning, right? Which to me, it felt like throwing out like a feeler, right? Just to see how the public reacted. It had like 900 likes and like 4,000 comments. Like the
Yeah.
as the kid says, like you got
Ratioed.
ratioed.
Yeah.
Yeah, she got ratioed big time. Like it was clear that the public was not letting this story just go. Like this was gonna continue to be a thing if she was gonna try and operate as if nothing happened, right? So they kind of threw that away. Now you fast forward to today, and she officially resigned from the Athletic, and she stated in the thing that it's more so because of her family and then the way she was getting harassed or all this other stuff, where there were a lot of Eagles fans out there that were like, hey, that's not so fun when the rabbit has the gun, right? Like you were always quick to put stories out there and make other people look bad, and now you're in the fire and you can't necessarily handle the pressure. So I can kind of see both sides of it, because if this is nothing and she is getting backlash, then of course it sucks. But at the same time, I don't think I would resign, or probably anybody that's watching this video, this live stream, would resign from a job if you were completely innocent, right? If nothing happened, you would just let the investigation play out, and just then you would obviously come out on the other side looking like you were you were in the right, and that and nothing was wrong, right? But clearly, it seems like the Athletics started their investigation. Maybe they were like, listen, can you prove to us that your friends were there, or that this wasn't just a one-on-one thing, or what was going on? And if she couldn't provide any proof, now it seems awfully convenient for her to resign, right? And say, oh, I need to do this for personal reasons and things like that. So I still think like when she was reporting stuff, now we know, or we know part of how she was getting things, right? But as far as how she was going about things as a reporter, I don't necessarily think it was terrible, right? But now, if this is the line that you're crossing to get those sources and maybe fabricating things a certain way, that's where, like I put out a lengthy tweet after we had our live stream initially reacting to it, that's where things get sketchy, right? Because once you blur that line of like a source or more than a source, right? Like it's like now it's a little bit too much because now are you purposely putting things out to help Mike Vrabel because he's giving you this or whatever you guys are doing out off the field or outside of any facilities, right? So that's where things get a little bit crazy. And clearly it reached the point where she couldn't deal with it. They can phrase it however they want, but if someone's resigning from a job, to me, that means, and I put a tweet out earlier today, like, you can't fire me because I quit, right? It's like she knew things were going to come to light. And now this is maybe her way of trying to avoid that coming to light. But this story isn't going anywhere. Who knows if anything's going to happen to Mike Vrabel? I doubt it. But also, could this be a situation that if they do more digging and they find out that there was some kind of like, especially involving the Eagles, where it's like, were they trying to facilitate an AJ Brown trade and kind of ruin things in Philly? Like, now do the Patriots have to all of a sudden give up a draft pick to the Eagles? Or like kind of like the Jonathan Gannon situation where the Eagles couldn't hire Vic Fangio because they were kind of meddling a little earlier than they should have been and before he went to Arizona. So I don't necessarily think anything's going to come of it in terms of benefiting the Eagles, but it's clear that some type of wrongdoing happened.
Yeah, it's there's a couple blatantly obvious ones, I suppose. Shout out to Matt, by the way, another great hat, Anthony, with a question mark there. Yeah, reference, or Anthony referenced reference for the.
I put a link in
there,
the chat.
There is a link, yes.
Might have to,
and I'll also share that again for people that are going back to the stream. I'll do it afterwards. It's a little difficult during in the midst of it, but it will be there. So, but yes, Anthony always with the strong hat game. You're right though. Like I saw somebody post this on Twitter, and I can't recall exactly who it was now, but it made me laugh, and it also made me go like, that's very true. That's very interesting. I just said like initially, I was like, yeah, well, where are the photos, right? If there was anything out there, you would see something. If they were with friends, and that was the initial argument of like, we were together, like, or we were separate with groups, and we just so happened to be at the same resort, which is like 100 miles away from where you would be for the NFL meetings, all this other stuff that doesn't really add up, and a lot of money per night, but maybe you're making so much money, doesn't matter. Just so happen to be at the same resort, adults only, cool. But even if that's all true, then somebody goes, you're telling me that Dianna Russini didn't have a single photo from her or any one of her friends on a girls' trip? Like, that would be the first time ever. You not a single girl on a girls' trip, only adults only group going out there didn't have a single photo to exonerate her. You go, oh, you know what? It was a trip with other friends. It's like, oh, get out of here. Like, we're not stupid, So it's like, once that was the initial public statement, and then you're seeing the photos, obviously too. It's like, there's more that's going on here that they're really, I mean, like, you think that people are going to buy that? And then obviously as time's gone on, like you said, if she was even halfway innocent, you would seem to just go like, well, let's see this thing through, right? Like, maybe she can come out on the other side and be okay. But the fact that it's to resign, or other people I know, and you kind of mentioned or alluding it to as well, like, it's a resign or we're going to fire you type of deal, whatever it is, to save face, maybe we'll let you take the first step if you want to. We won't say that you're, however it goes out. But like, there's a whole lot more there. So I don't know. I mean, Mike Vrabel, the fact that he didn't show up for a press conference before the draft, which usually he would take part in. They're saying, oh, he's a lot more involved this year than he was in the years past. Maybe he is.
Sure.
Maybe he is. I mean, like, kudos to you, man. Like, it really looked like in Sedona you were very involved in the draft.
He's involved, all right.
Just trying to save face. So it is just, I'm curious, and I know it's a different standpoint, and this can go in a whole other argument, which we're not going to go there, but it's like a different standpoint of like, oh, what's the bar that someone's held to in Dianna Russini and Mike Vrabel? Is he going to get fired or everything else? Like, morally, ethically, whatever, like, they're both married, so and it seems like there is, but something there, like, completely wrong. So don't, give that any sort of like, oh, it's kind of okay. It's wrong, completely wrong. But from like a job standpoint, the journalist is trying to hold the coach to some level of like, hey, reporting accuracy, independent there, and the credibility gets blurred, like you're mentioning there, super quickly as soon as that happens. Now, again, the coach absolutely wrong, certainly because he's married, and I would question like, the players in the building for the Patriots, he's had public like pressers or post-game speeches, other things that have come out about Vrabel and him sharing like accountability and being big on this and like, owning up to things. I know it's maybe too early, and maybe he does have a press conference. Maybe he does say something there, but for the initial reaction or the initial action being taken of like, oh, well, Mike Vrabel's not going to speak at the mic. It's kind of like, personally, I lose respect for him a little bit already from that. But then also it's like, feels like there's a little bit more here that they're trying to hide behind the scenes. But it's the Patriots too. So, again, like, would we expect anything less? I don't know.
Yeah, so the main thing that I kind of think of now that Dianna Russini resigned, so it makes me think there was some type of wrongdoing. I know we don't want to speculate too much, but you can kind of read what's happening, right? Like, clearly, like Mike Vrabel's not talking, Dianna Russini resigns. Like, clearly there's something going on there, right? So my mind, as a Celtics fan, I know people don't want me to bring that up, but it immediately goes to the Ime Udoka situation, right? Where he was supposedly having some type of relations. I mean, granted, that was a member of the Celtics. She worked for the Celtics or still works for the Celtics. I don't know if the name ever came out there, but they ended up firing him, or however they wanted to phrase it, because of that situation, right? Like, clearly Dianna Russini doesn't work for the Patriots, but she kind of talks to everybody around the league, right? So it's going to come down to if the Patriots view this as some type of like conduct detrimental to the team thing that would void his contract or whatever the case might be, because let's be honest, that's what it comes down to, right? Is the financial the financial part of this whole situation is because like now if they're going to like get rid of Mike Vrabel, usually those deals are guaranteed a ton of money, right? And he's probably one of the higher paid coaches in the NFL. So I don't think he's going to be like let go. I think it's the NFL. If you're fast enough, if you're good enough at your job, the NFL, unfortunately, right or wrong, they're going to be able to find a way to sweep it under the rug, and they're going to still stay employed. It happens with players. It happens with coaches. Unless something crazy comes out, then I don't see Mike Vrabel losing his job. But it does just open up more things, because this is a very public, like front-facing member of an NFL organization, right? Like Mike Vrabel's going to have to talk a whole lot these next couple months, whether it's after the draft or at OTAs and training camp. Like, there's no hiding from the media. These questions are going to come up. So it's just a matter of, are they going to issue a statement? Are they going to not allow media members to ask them questions about it? So we'll see how it goes. But it's certainly a messy situation that I'm happy the Eagles don't have to deal with. Like, this is a Patriots problem. People want to bring the Eagles into it because of the A.J. Brown of it all. But I think that's still a totally separate thing. I don't think the Eagles are not going to trade A.J. Brown to the Patriots or any other team because of this situation, which I've seen some people throw out there. I think that's still a very real possibility. But this whole situation is just maybe deserves more attention than it's probably going to get from the mainstream media. But that's a whole nother side of the argument.
Maybe we get a third round pick out of it or something. I mean, maybe it's like the Cardinals. Probably not, but maybe it is. Would be interesting.
Never know.
Toaster Bath, interesting with a 5. Do you think the Eagles make a trade for safety? If so, who would you think stands out? And also, do you think the Eagles are building to trade AJ next year? So hold off and trade him the following year. 2-part question on that.
So first, I'll start with the first part of the question was about potential trade targets at safety. I actually have an article up on the PhillySpecialShow.com that I believe I posted last week that has, I believe it was 6 options in the draft, basically 2 in the first round, 2 on day 2, 2 on day 3, and then 4 trade options. And I'll just give one of those now. So hopefully you go to the PhillySpecialShow.com and actually read the article. But Justin Reed was a name that I kind of came up because the Saints were obviously able to sign him last offseason, but the Eagles were reportedly in the mix and trying to sign him. It seems like he liked playing for, not playing for Vic Fangio, but the idea of playing for Vic Fangio. And now, fast forward another year, they have Jonas Sanker, who they drafted last year, who looked really good as a starter, and they've added a few other pieces at safety. If they add another one in the draft, then that could be a sign that they're going to eventually trade Justin Reed, and he seems like he would make a lot of sense for the Eagles as a trade target.
And he also, we've covered this as well and spoken about it, but he plays or one of the best at single high whenever in a safety formation, and that's something that Fangio, we know, utilizes quite a bit. So just from an alignment, it already made sense because of the interest that the Eagles have had in him previously, but just from a positional scheme-wise fit, how it could be in a Fangio defense, it would be pretty good. But do they make a splash? I don't know. I thought so. Like, it depends if the draft falls the right way. I think that they could. Zach Berman was sharing recently. I think he was on with an interview with a Fanatic. If I'm not mistaken, I covered it in the last video, but I can't remember who he talked with where, because let's be honest, beat writers, people that cover the Eagles, just NFL in general, they're all over the place. So I think it's the Fanatic, but apologies if he was talking to somebody else. Basically, Zach was saying that he's not sure that it's going to be any sort of big splash at safety, and that includes the draft. He's like, look, offensively, you got some guys that you need to either replace or build for the future. The contract's obviously involved with having a very cheap defense, but it's going to turn over quickly and become very expensive, and vice versa for the offense. So wasn't really buying into a whole lot of safety contributions or I guess like safety allocation for funds or picks or whatever capital you want to talk about. So it'll be interesting. But yes, I think that is a name for trade, but I've begun to lean more towards kind of the same thing. Like if they do make a move and we say like a big splash in quotes, big splash, but like probably lean towards more of a draft wise, if it is anything at all. And that would be, one of those guys that we say, the big three that we've talked about in the first round, maybe they've just fallen to 23 and it's like, you know what? Hey, take best player available. We're good to go. But I don't know, not as much as maybe in the past based on that.
Yeah, and it's at the same time it's so interesting, right? Because it feels like everybody was saying the same thing in 2024 when they were like, "Oh, they're not going to take a cornerback in the first round because that's just not what they do." And then they took one in the first round and the second round. And then last year it's just like
linebacker.
Not only did we not entertain the idea of Jahad Campbell because everybody thought he was going to be probably like a top 20 player, but it just also seemed like, oh, they don't take linebackers early, right? So now this year it's like, oh, they're not going to take a Kenyon Sadiq if they need to trade up for a tight end because they don't take tight ends earlier than the second round. Or now it's, oh, they don't take safeties early. They don't value the position, where these last 2 years have kind of changed my mind, right? Where I think I'm not ruling any of this out because Howie Roseman said it himself earlier today that sometimes they go into a draft and they've been victims of like, they had these guys ranked in a similar tier, but they went with a player that maybe was a little bit lower than the other one because it was a position that they value more. Whereas now they really try and just harp on the best player. Like even if he said if it's a position that we weren't thinking we were going to target going into the event, which may have been the case with Jahad Campbell, right? Like if you think this guy's a top 15 player and all of a sudden he's falling into the teens and below that, and you're like, wait, we can get this guy? Like they were trying to trade up. You saw it on the behind the scenes video. They were trying to trade up in like the late teens, early 20s. They were trying all night and eventually just got him at 31. So if it's a position of whether it's Emmanuel McNeil-Warren or Dylan Thiedemann or any other safety that they like, I wouldn't rule out. I know, like I said, a lot of the guys that I respect, especially Zach Berman, is probably one of my favorite Eagles beat reporters. If he's saying it, I tend to lean towards what he's saying is true. But at the same time, I'm trying not to rule things out. And just going back to that last super chat, I know they mentioned A.J. Brown potentially trading him in 2027. To me, it feels like a now or like it's not going to happen. Like I think it's going to happen this year. And I feel like everything they've done, and I mentioned it on my radio hits earlier today, the fact that if you just look in recent years, they never really invested in wide receiver depth once they had Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown outside of the trade for Jahan Dotson, but he wasn't making a ton of money. It wasn't like they traded anything crazy. I mean, I guess a third round pick, but now not only did you add Hollywood Brown for $6 million or whatever it was, now you traded for a Dontayvion Wicks, which is draft capital, and you signed him to an extension. Like these are notable additions at wide receiver. It's not just the usual late round picks or undrafted free agents or veteran minimum signings. Like normally they would just bring in an Elijah Moore and that would be it for wide receiver, right? But now they made three notable like additions. I mean, all three players have started in recent years. So to me, I still think an A.J. Brown trade is coming, and until it doesn't happen, then I'm just going to keep thinking that it is.
We will see. It's the story that'll continue, certainly until June 2nd, and then maybe even beyond then if it doesn't happen. But like, just thinking time-wise. So keep everybody posted. Who knows? Aisha with a 10. Appreciate that. Hey, Josh and Ant-Man. Looking forward to tonight's chat. Would love to get Sadiq in round 1. Also, I say let them doubt QB1. You know it means we're going to the Super Bowl again. Let's freaking go. Go Birds. Hashtag no tears for Russini. It's a hashtag that started now.
Yeah, Eagles fans are not holding anything back when it comes to Russini. They already had it
understandable.
Now that there's a story to go after her for, it's definitely a rough time in the Russini household. It
certainly is. But to the other comments from the super chat there, we would all love to get Kenyon Sadiq in round 1. Like if he's available there at 23, if he's available in the 17 to 20 range, you just trade up a little bit and go get Kenyon Sadiq. The fact that they brought him in for a 30 visit, which talked about previously on another video and also did a little short about it. Anthony's recorded all the 30 visits, again, the phillyspecialshow.com, all the breakdowns there. But exciting prospect. I mean, insane athleticism. I've seen some people going, yeah, like, and this one's interesting to me. There's two things. One, I kind of understand, but it doesn't mean as much to me. And then the other one that just like seems ridiculously crazy. One is the comment of, yeah, but Kenyon Sadiq is like production not great in college. Like, yeah, he had some flashes, but production wasn't exactly there. There's times in various instances in the past where like tight ends that come to the NFL level and become all pros and produce at crazy high levels, you go back and look at their college stats and it's like hardly anything. So if you were going to say like, hey, project this guy out, you didn't see it there in college. Like a lot of what happens, especially with the tight end position, is you see what they have physically, athletically, like the IQ wise, what can they do, but not necessarily like, oh man, he put up 1,000 yards receiving, a couple years and you were super dominant and everything else. Like that doesn't always happen. I mean, the same thing for receiver, I guess, but it feels like more so for the tight end. I think George Kittle was one of the better examples someone shared on a recent one of like, in college, he was not this like crazy receiving tight end threat. But then all of a sudden you go to the Niners and he's been a perennial like guaranteed pick. I mean, you're going to take fantasy football tight ends, what, like top 3, top 4, basically every single year, as long as he's not hurt. So it's not to me like the biggest deal as far as like you want to go production wise, because this dude is I mean, literally the most athletic tight end. We could argue like, well, maybe the blocking, everything, what he can do or could do on the offensive side of the ball, or I should say receiving side of the ball, is worth, if you want to call it, yes, I guess a little bit of a risk, but to me that part is just, like I say, that's one of the two crazy takeaways.
So first, I just want to say like it's crazy that you just said George Kittle, because as you were talking, I went ahead and looked up.
Were you really? Oh, I see it there. Yes.
His
no
college
way.
stats.
Oh, no way.
So George Kittle's best season in college. Everybody
Here we go. Yep.
George Kittle, eventual Hall of Fame tight end, like regarded as one of the best for years now in the NFL. Best college season, 22 receptions for 314 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Stop.
So I don't want to hear that, oh, he only had 500 yards. He's not going to be a good NFL player. It's very rare that you see a Tyler Warren where he had 100 receptions for all these yards and he was getting carries and all these touchdowns. Like college tight ends usually aren't utilized like that. And I feel like if Kenyon Sadiq was at Penn State last year, I feel like he could have did everything that Tyler Warren did. I feel like he could have easily had that, been force-fed all those touches. I just think projecting a player at the next level, Sadiq just checks all of the boxes, right? I mean, maybe he's a little bit shorter than you'd like ideally, but he plays bigger than that. I mean, he's physical as a blocker. He's not going to be a guy that you want one-on-one with an edge rusher, but if you get him out in space and to the second level, he can do some damage in the running game. He's not going to be a Grant Calcaterra complete negative in the run game. And I feel like what he offers as a pass catcher, especially if you're going to entertain trading an A.J. Brown, he could almost be like your second highest targeted player behind Devonta Smith, right? Like you can get him 60, 70 plus catches in a season as your second target in like a very viable passing game. So that's where I think, once again, people want to say the Eagles don't value tight end. They're not going to trade up for him. In my next mock draft that I was kind of teasing to you before we started this live stream, I'm very seriously contemplating a huge trade up to get Kenyon Sadiq, because I think that he's the type of foundational player that the Eagles can view as in like a relatively weak class. All these reports came out today from Jordyn Schultz and other people that a lot of teams in the top 10 or the teams are looking to trade back, where the Eagles, Howie Roseman, he's traded up a bunch in the first round in recent years. Not necessarily a massive leap, but I'll just throw it out here now as a treat for everybody in the live stream. The projected trade that I have them doing in my mock draft is 23, so their first round pick, 54, their second round pick, and then 137th overall pick, which is their fourth round pick, for 13 from the Rams. So you're jumping ahead of the Ravens, which if you look at all the point trade value charts and things like that, the math works well there. And then I have them later in the draft trading back from 68 to get 3 more picks from another team. So you're kind of trading 3 picks to move up in the first and then dropping back around 17 spots or so, I believe it was, and then getting more picks, another 4th, another 5th, and then you're just moving down a little bit in the third. So you're still keeping 8 picks, big, but you're getting yourself Kenyon Sadiq, and who's a guy that's clearly the best player at tight end, clearly regarded as one of the best offensive players, period, in the draft. And I feel like in a relatively weak class, the Eagles could take the chance on a position that they may not view as like super valuable every other year, but Sadiq is that type of like game changing player in my opinion.
And you're right. You think about Saquon Barkley. Like I didn't think it was very likely. You thought it was impossible, but it happened, and then Howie Roseman's comments on it, and then you kind of rationalize it even more, so you're like, okay, yeah, duh, that of course makes sense. He's like, don't even view Saquon, yes, he's a running back, but don't even view him that way. It's like another offensive weapon, like just a playmaker on the field. So if yes, Sadiq plays tight end, yes, he would be in that formation, that spot, but a playmaker on the field like that in that offense with Sean Mannion and how he utilizes, or how the systems he's been a part of utilize the tight end position, get out of here. Like, it'd be night and day difference. So yeah, to me, I'm on board with that one. Would be interesting though. I mean, that type of a trade, we're talking about a big time move up there from 23 to 13. It makes sense from the point system, like you say. It feels like that's what you would have to do if you wanted Kenyon Sadiq though. So I agree for all the rationalization there, because I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that I think starting at 14 is basically the case that you can make, right? Like for any team, like, oh, maybe they could get a tight end, might want to take a tight end. Others could, sure, like earlier. But I think realistically, a lot of the mock drafts or other guys saying like these teams could take it, starts at 14. So 13 is the perfect sense of trading up to that point. But it's 10 spots, that it takes a lot. And I've seen comments already. I know, like, that's a lot. It's not going to happen. We never know. Howie's been known to do some crazy things. It'll be better if he trades up. We just say this, historically speaking. Shout out to Jimmy Kimsky, did a great piece and breakdown on this. But historically speaking, it is better for Howie Roseman to trade up than do anything else. If he stays put, it could be okay percentage-wise on the hit rates of players. If he trades back and stays put, that's the worst case scenario. We do not want that.
Yeah, I mean, they've traded up for Devonta Smith, Jalen Carter, basically everybody but Quinyon Mitchell, it feels like in recent years. Even Jahad Campbell was like a little move up. So even if it's not a drastic trade up, and people also have to keep in mind that this is going to be my 9th Eagles mock draft. So one of the only things that I haven't done so far is like a massive trade up in the first round. So I got to get a little bit creative. So my last mock draft that I'll do, that'll be like my real final projections. I'm probably not going to be having them make that trade, but I could definitely see them, even if that's not the case. Say they're at 23, right? Cleveland's at 24. Say Cleveland takes an offensive skill position play. They take, I don't know, Carnell Tate early, like with their first pick, right? And now they're waiting for an offensive tackle to fall to them. But they want to trade ahead of the Eagles because they know the Eagles might be contemplating a Max Ahanacho or something like that, right? So maybe the Eagles trade up to 22 or 21, like a small jump up to kind of box out the Browns from getting their offensive tackle. I could also see the Eagles kind of doing something like that too. So one thing Howie Roseman is not going to do is sit on his hands and wait for something to happen. He got very lucky with Quinyon Mitchell falling in his lap. So who knows? Maybe we'll see a Kenyon Sadiq just fall down the board as all these other guys go ahead of him. But I also, my bet right now would be Howie Roseman going to move up in some capacity. 1 pick, 10 picks, who knows? But my guess is that he'll move up.
Yeah, he said they have 23 guys that they could potentially be happy with, but it's fewer than that, and they're on tiers. So he's like, if there's a guy that's available and we can trade up to get him, we're not going to hesitate. We will act. And that's what he said today in the presser, which we've seen that too many times. Matt with a 10 Philly Special Show memberships. You're the man. Matt with another one. Gift to 10 members there. Access to the giveaways and everything else. The extra special ones for the members. But shout out to you. Get the ticket giveaways that'll be happening next season. Try to actually surpass our record. Last year we had over 50 ticket giveaways. So
sheesh.
Try to run it back even better. Toaster with 5 more. Sorry for the AJ stuff. I would love to see him stay, but thank you both for all the info all the time. Appreciate you both. Free pick from the Pats with a question mark. LOL. Yeah, we kind of covered that a second ago as far as the potential tampering. But yeah, we're in the same boat. Appreciate the love and the support. We've said this a million different times, and every once in a while people either come on, I feel like they catch a little snippet, or they don't hear it enough, or maybe they're new to the channel and they haven't heard the full take of this. But we don't want AJ to leave. It's a possibility, so we discuss it there.
Yeah, I Anthony DiBona, do not believe the Philadelphia Eagles would be a better football team without AJ Brown. But everything that I've watched on the field and heard off the field over the last year or so seems to point that maybe it might be best for both sides to move on. So that's kind of what we're entertaining and talking from. And we'll see, hopefully, in a month and a half or so, if that's going to come to fruition or not.
I did have a couple people that messaged out or reached out, because it's funny. People will, I think they see, and I'm going to get this other super chat here in a second from Fanny. Appreciate that. I think people see either the transcripts or people post quotes from press conferences, and it's why it's important to watch the press conference rather than just read it. Sometimes the quotes are more than enough, and that's fine. But context, tone, body language, a lot of other things are very crucial in that. And so I had somebody that was like, I posted or maybe the comment from one of the videos or whatnot, and I was just saying like, oh, the Dontayvion Wicks trade, could mean that AJ's less likely to be here. There's some ramifications, at least a little bit, you have to think. And they're like, well, hey, Howie said AJ's staying, buddy. I'm like, did he? Not really. He said AJ's an Eagle. He's maintained the same thing, but it's also a non-committal stance. Now, we could get into an argument over semantics and exactly how much does that mean. But he hasn't ever officially said we are not trading AJ, as other teams have said about other players. AJ may very well be here, and we would certainly love to see AJ on the Eagles if he's fully bought in, locked in, wants to be here. Because yes, I think 99% of us, I think maybe 100, but 99% of us understand the Eagles are a better team with A.J. Brown. But it just feels like there's a little bit more to it there. And if the Eagles get a price, Howie's made it clear that they would do business. Like, he's never said, oh, well, we wouldn't trade A.J. Brown. No, if he gets the right price, then he will do business there. So it just kind of remains to be seen. Before we get into the presser real quick with the 10 from Fanny, appreciate that. Hey, Josh and Ant-Man, glad to see you guys. Thank you for that. Russini is proof you can't swim in muddy waters. You reap what you sow. Blessings to you both. True words, never been spoken. That's accurate there. But thank you. Yes.
Eventually, it'll catch up to you somehow. Sometimes you can't get away with it all the time. It's gonna pop up somehow.
Yep, 100. On the Howie presser, should we briefly touch on that? We're gonna probably bounce around here with the super chats, but what I was alluding to, as far as just the initial press conference, though, was Howie's defending Jalen, the comments from the reports. He's like, yes, I've seen it, and kind of going into it and and I'm paraphrasing, but we have our issues internally. The way the quote read at first was kind of like, whoa, he's admitting that they do have issues, kind of maybe of not directly communicating. But then if you hear it, it's like, well, no. He's saying that they do have some issues internally, but especially for him, for Jeffrey Lurie and Nick Sirianni, if they have concerns or issues with any player, especially Jalen Hurts, they will let him know directly.
Yeah, so the way because at first I didn't catch that part of the press conference. I was at my full-time job, and I was trying to catch it, but I couldn't. I just read the quote on Twitter, and I was like, wait a second. That's the way it reads, like you mentioned, is he pretty much said one thing that we're not that we don't do pretty much is that we don't talk. We don't have poor communication with our players or things like that. But the way it reads, when you hear it, he was saying that that's not a problem, that that's not something that they do. Whereas if you just read the text, it makes it read like that is something that they have an issue with, where it's they aren't able to communicate with their players or things. So it's that's like you mentioned, you really have to watch that answer to kind of fully grasp it. But overall, I feel like it was a typical Howie Roseman presser, right? We didn't get too much. He dove into a little bit of the draft strategy and stuff like that, a little bit more than I thought he may have, but still kept it super generic, not really getting into too much details. And he was specifically asked about the offensive linemen and how they evaluate that situation now without Jeff Stoutland, where he was like, I'm not going to give anything away, especially with the draft this close, things like that. So I don't know. I don't think there was too much to take from it. One thing that did stand out to me, and I don't know if you even caught this or not, but he mentioned how everybody knows that the Eagles always look for players with that dog mentality, especially since Nick Sirianni arrived, right? If you look at a lot of the guys they've drafted early in the draft, especially, usually they're trash talkers. They're passionate about the game. You could see it on the field and character is big for the Eagles, right? There's been the reports that they won't take anybody that has any type of sexual abuse, allegations or anything like that, where Howie Roseman was asked about their draft strategy and things like that and how they factor in character. And he said, and I quote, "You're taking players who are taking pay cuts now." So he which is with the NIL, right? These players are, especially if they're a day 3 pick, they're going from probably making multiple millions or at least $1 million for coming back to school when they're 23, 24 to now that might be the total value of their contract if they're like a super late round pick, right? So he said now more than ever, character, passion, their love for the game is more important, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But he also mentioned how this might be the first year where, I mean, the last year where you're seeing a lot of these much older prospects like 24, 25, because it's the last year of like that COVID year, giving them an extra year. So maybe it might balance out. But I still think NIL is going to keep a lot of college players like in school, for especially if they're going to be like a fringe NFL player. It makes more sense to stay in school, get as much money as possible, and then move up to the pros.
Yeah, you're right. I did hear that, but I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like you know it, or at least most of us kind of do, but you don't fully put it into perspective until like going, oh yeah, like what they would make comparatively to play in the pros is less than what a lot of them are going to be or had been making in college.
Crazy.
It's such a wild. I mean, there's so many concerns and issues and a whole other thing that you could talk about with college and NIL. But yeah, like, and I thought it was interesting too because there was a follow-up question for Nick Sirianni, and really not a whole lot worth listening to from like you said, the full presser, but like Sirianni, you know, not much there. No offense. But he did get asked like, hey, is it harder to recruit guys, or is it harder to not really recruit guys, but to get backgrounds on guys for the draft, right? Because it's like you're always having to do this legwork again for college players anyway. But now with the NIL, you got these guys that are older, and as you say, they're getting paid. They're going to take pay cuts to, like, where is that extra? You know, you want toughness, you want competitiveness, you want that passion. Now, is it more difficult? You know, and I would seem to think that it was. Now, Sirianni kind of just poured some cold water on that. Goes, yeah, it's kind of basically the same stuff. But as he kept talking, as he normally does, he slowly reveals a little bit of subtleties if you pick up on those. And then he kind of admitted that it is a little bit different. So, you know, it's a give and take with that. But it makes sense because the world's changed. The whole process has changed, certainly post-COVID. But then you add in the NIL portion of that. And it is. It's a small part of the drafting process and kind of getting your board solidified how you want to. But really mattering even more so of like a lot of the guys that if they're comfortable and they've been getting paid, they may not have as much of that drive anymore because like, well, you know, in the past I wasn't making any money, so I really got to make that first contract. And then maybe there's not as much of the passion for the game, like a Bryce Huff, for example, right? Like he gets big paid and he retires early. You have someone else that has already made, I don't know, $10 million, maybe more. And then they make the team because like, well, you got drafted. Okay, congratulations. But are they going to be the type that's going to show up from day one and be like, I'm fighting for my position compared to X player who's didn't get a whole lot or if anything of NIL money, and maybe they were UDFA and they're raw, but they just want to give all of their everything to the game and try to make a spot on the roster. It starts making a bigger difference. So it's an interesting dynamic to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I think it kind of brings back up because I know a couple of years ago it was like a joke, right? That Nick Sirianni would play basketball against the players, or they would do rock paper scissors or things like that. And like, but now if he's saying that the evaluation is getting tougher to kind of figure out who's competitive, who really wants it or not, little things like that when they bring these guys in on visits or even the formal meetings at the combine, like you're able to kind of bring out their competitiveness and see like even if it's not football, because obviously I feel like on tape you can usually tell if a guy's competitive or not. There are ways, especially at certain positions, to tell if a guy really wants it or not, right? Because if you're getting paid off the field, like when you get on the field, there are still ways to kind of lollygag and you're not running to the ball or things like that. The play goes to a different direction. You're kind of just like jogging. Like there's ways to tell on tape, but off the field with these small interactions that they have, like if a guy is competitive in like a shootout in the Eagles auditorium on that basketball hoop that we see so many times in these clips with Nick Sirianni, like that is a way for them to kind of tell if this guy wants it or not. So little things like that we'll probably never really learn about or hear about until the player is already there. Like I'm sure a lot of that goes into the evaluation now more than ever.
Yep. A lot of stuff interesting, just behind the scenes, things to think about, which makes it interesting. Brando Shreds with a 10, appreciate that. To people, back to the Russini comments and Vrabel, of course we are. To people saying Vrabel not being unethical, just immoral, dude is on company time who paid for... Or question, who paid for the 4-hour travel? Who paid for his room and day at the resort? He's in Arizona in a coach/scouting capacity. And he was scouting, kind of. Maybe not the way that you'd want him to, but It's true, right? There's so many things wrong with it. I don't know at what point is Vrabel held accountable, if he is at all, because it's par for the course a little bit for the Patriots. I mean, we'll see. Maybe eventually he gets a press conference, and not that I don't care who it is. Not that I think that Elliot Wolf, who did have a press conference, needed to be asked about Mike Vrabel, because it's not fair for him to have to answer for Vrabel's actions. But you didn't have a single reporter even bring up anything. And there was at the very end, it was and it felt like a way to ask about Vrabel without, and I'm sure that before the press conference, they were told, do not ask about Mike Vrabel in those pictures, right? So it's like, okay, you understand there's certain things that are on limits, off limits. But it was like what can you tell us about, I'm paraphrasing again, but it's like basically, what can you tell us about Vrabel's involvement ahead of the draft? Like, keeping it draft-wise, but, if Elliot Wolf wants to steer this thing a different direction, everybody will kind of perk up a little bit. And, of course, he kind of goes, he's been more involved this year than he has in previous years. It's just like, it's a whole PR game. We all understand it and get that, but the fact that sometimes they'd still try to just pull the wool over eyes and think that we're not smart enough to see there's something else is kind of ridiculous.
That's what's going to be so fascinating about this situation with Mike Vrabel, because like I mentioned earlier, he's going to have to kind of face the music at a certain point, right? He can't just dodge the media as a head coach of an NFL team, right? You're going to have these media obligations, and you can only dodge it for so long. But like you mentioned, there could be ways for them to kind of skirt it where, look at the Eagles, what they did before the combine, right? They had this kind of secret meeting with all the beat reporters where they let them talk for an hour with Howie Roseman and Sirianni and ask all these questions, and nobody learned about it until the quotes came out like 3 days later. And then all of a sudden at the combine, they didn't really have to answer too much about AJ Brown or some other guy, like other situations, right? So to me, that was their way of saying, like, listen, we know you guys have these questions. You can ask them behind closed doors. We'll be able to kind of control what you put out there, what's not put out there. So maybe that's kind of the route that the Patriots take with Mike Vrabel, but still, it's certainly not a situation that's going anywhere, like we said before.
Not at all. David with a 5. How do you rank the Eagles' top 3 roster needs? Here we go. Little draft question. Edge, offensive line, safety, tight end, cornerback. I guess just throwing out some possibilities for us. Also, what's the status of Jalen Carter contract? Great show. Thanks. Go Birds. Appreciate that, David. First off, ranking the top 3 roster needs positionally.
So if I'm going right now, let's just assume AJ Brown is here, right? And that Lane Johnson stays healthy and things like that. I think safety is immediately the number one option, because I feel like, Marcus Epps could start, but ideally I feel like you don't want him starting, right? You want somebody more long-term. And even now, that's a better player than Marcus Epps is, right? Like, he offers a relatively high floor as like a backup, but ideally he's not going to be starting for you. And then after that, that's where things can get like a little interesting, because they did bring back a Dallas Goedert. They did bring back Lane Johnson, Fred Johnson, offensive tackle, because those probably would have been my next 2 spots. But edge might be in that conversation, I feel like, because they don't really have much beyond this upcoming season, because we've mentioned that Jalen Hunt is pretty much the only one that's definitely secured beyond this season, where Nolan Smith, I'm expecting them to pick up and exercise his 5th-year option. But beyond that, everybody else is seemingly on like a 1-year deal. So edge would probably be next up. And then I feel like I still have to throw offensive tackle in there, because like personally, offensive tackle would still be number 1 as far as like if you're telling me over the next 2-3 years. But for an immediate need, I think safety is ahead of that. But offensive tackle still could be a problem, because Lane Johnson gets hurt or Fred Johnson comes in and he doesn't look the best, because his play was a little up and down last season. And I think that's why he didn't have the free agent market that maybe he expected. So I feel like they could improve there both now and then in 2027. If Lane Johnson is gone, they need to have some type of plan in place.
Yep. Several of those. I agree for a number of reasons on those. But also, I guess, Jalen Carter contract, nothing yet. We understood that there's a potential working out the deal. They have plenty of time if they were going to get something done, but it will be interesting, because we've gone back and forth of saying, like, from Jalen Carter's camp, I'm sure there's a number that he wants, having seen Milton Williams' contract and everything else. But after that as well, like, okay, what am I worth? At the same time, from the Eagles, they didn't see that last year. There's been a few things off the field, just some question marks and things that pop up character-wise or spitting on a player. And, yes, there was partially Dak's fault, but it's also some self-control at times too, and getting yourself kicked out of a game. Jeffrey Lurie basically said it without saying it by how little he spoke about Jalen Carter compared to then, oh, Jalen Hurts, let me tell you. Oh, I will say how great he is. Let you know how he feels about Jalen Carter. It's not that they hate him, but it's not the same of like, if Jalen Hurts was, it was reversed right now, and you're like, hey, we got to figure this thing out, get Jalen Hurts that contract. When he did get the 255, it would be like, this thing's done now. Like there's no question about it. It'll get done. You could understand where Drew Rosenhaus, I'm sure, is like, no, we are getting 100 million plus, right? And then Howie Roseman and the Eagles are like, yeah, like we see he could potentially be that player, but he kind of hasn't been. And last year he was worse than Jordan Davis. So maybe prove it.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting situation to play out, right? Because before last season, pretty much everybody thought he was coming off that All-Pro season. They're like, oh, Jalen Carter is just going to take the next step. He's going to finally get that double-digit sack season. He's going to be an All-Pro again. And it just like didn't go according to plan, right? He had the lowest sack total that he's had in his career so far. And obviously it wasn't a suspension, but he was kicked out of the game. And then the shoulder injury, like nothing pretty much went his way last year. Even when he was on the field, he wasn't necessarily always making plays like we became used to in the previous 2 years. So right now it seems like both sides might just be like, listen, let's see how next year goes, and they'll exercise his 5th-year option and then take it from there. But I also think maybe like now the Dexter Lawrence situation can play a factor because he seems to be wanting a new contract from the Giants. So now maybe Rosenhaus and Jalen Carter are like, let's see what he gets. And then we already know what Jordan Davis got. Let's see what he gets. And we can kind of ask for a number even more than that. So who knows what'll happen. I still think Jalen Carter is going to be around in Philadelphia for a while, but the fact that he did have such kind of a disappointing year, both on and off the field with the injuries and the spitting incident, I feel like there's reason for the Eagles to be a little bit less optimistic about Jalen Carter right now in 2026.
And it could be a great position to be in, though, as you're saying. Like, if it's a prove it, and he's got to get a contract, then, and he's been putting in the work, like you see all this stuff on Instagram and getting in shape, rehab, everything else. When Jalen Carter's healthy, we all know he is a game wrecker. Like, listen to other players that have played against him and say like how difficult it is to try to stop Jalen Carter. When Jalen Carter's on his game, he's going to get his. Like, it's just impossible to stop him. So yeah, the combination there, make life easier for everybody. And maybe it is. Maybe he gets a deal done before. If I'm Philly, unless he just absolutely gave you a massive discount, I'd probably be in the same boat almost of being like, we appreciate it, but go get you 10 sacks. If it makes us pay another $20 million over the course of your 4 or 5 year extension, we will gladly sign up for that. You get your double-digit sacks, prove that you're close to or maybe a defensive player of the year, and then yes, we will absolutely pay you like that. Aisha with a 10, appreciate that. AJ has had knee issues and missed games every season. Maybe that's why we're creating depth at wide receiver position. The new wide receivers don't look like wide receiver twos to me. No offense to the new wide receivers that we got, though. No offense to Hollywood Brown, Dontayvion, Wicks, or Elijah Moore. I saw that similar takeaway, and I shared that in the last video from Ruben Frank, who suggested kind of the same thing, saying that if A.J. Brown is not going to be here, he doesn't expect that Hollywood, Dontayvion, or Elijah is the answer as wide receiver 2. It would have to be someone in the draft. And, I don't think that it's impossible for them to take someone in the draft. If they do take someone like that, though, and we're sitting there going like, hey, first round, second round pick, they take another receiver, it already feels like it's towards the direction of an AJ being traded. At that point, if they take a receiver, first round or second round, maybe even third round, but first round or second round, I don't care what Howie could get up there then and say, we're not going to trade AJ Brown, and you forget about it. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not buying that one of that, because why in the world have you traded picks to get Dontayvion Wicks? You signed Hollywood Brown, you drafted this receiver, and then you're going, yeah, we're not really, like, the writing is blatantly on the wall at that point.
Yeah, I said it in our last video that like Howie Roseman's still going to be able to frame it and say, listen, like we've seen with the JSN contract and these other wide receivers that this market is absurd, right? And like we're going to be able to we're maximize. He was the best player on our board. Like the value was there from a position standpoint and a contractual standpoint, because if somebody does go down, we haven't invested in depth, and you've seen what we already did with Hollywood Brown and Dontayvion Wicks or Tay as they referred to him earlier today, which I like that. I'll go with that. So, but he's gonna be able to sell it no matter what. But obviously, us from the outside looking in, I'm already at like a 90% leaning towards AJ Brown getting traded. If they draft the wide receiver within the first 2 days of the draft, that's 100%. There's no way to me you can sell me on AJ Brown's going to be there after, like you mentioned, bringing in Hollywood Brown, trading for Wicks, and now investing a high draft pick in a wide receiver, like clearly that means AJ Brown is out the door. So we'll see what they do. They've already hosted multiple wide receivers that are projected to go in that range on 30 visits, and they've interviewed others. So it seems like a real possibility, but it's just going to come down to, I mean, I don't know. I get the AJ Brown injury concern and how they can kind of pitch it and frame it that way, but I'm not buying it. I'm sorry. I can't get jiggy with that idea out there.
Yeah, yeah. But I understand and appreciate the comment. If AJ is still here, I agree with you of like, hey, look, it's not bad to have depth. We've seen injuries in the past. And if maybe it's like, again, it's all hypotheticals here, but like I say, if they're potentially trying to trade AJ, but it needs to be for the right price, but if they can't do it, then they're wondering, well, is he going to like be completely locked in for the season? Is he going to have some injuries that we already have some concerns about? So it's never a bad thing. Yeah, I mean, get some other guys and acquire the talent there, but it's like Zach Berman brought up, and I referenced in one of the other videos too, is Dontayvion Wicks was paid the most money. It's not astronomical, I understand that, but still paid the most money out of any receiver since A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, outside of that. So it's still some sort of investment in a 1-year, $12.5 million extension. And they gave up a 5th round and a 6th round, right? So it's not crazy, I know that, but it's still some compensation there that they're giving up and draft equity for a receiver that, like, if AJ's still here, then like Hollywood or Dontayvion, again, depth is great, but you also are not really making some of those moves to say like, at least we got him. He may have 5 catches this year. Because if everyone stays healthy and it goes like you would expect or hope it would, then like you legitimately, I mean, there was a year where wide receiver 3 had 10 catches for it in Olamide Zaccheaus. It's going to be a different offense, so I'm praying and hoping that whoever wide receiver 3 is not 10 catches, but like whoever wide receiver 4 is, and that would make Hollywood or Dontayvion like nothing basically. It is good to have depth, so I will give that to you. Maybe that's what it turns out to be, but it feels like they have a little bit bigger plans, the way that Howie was talking about Tay. And I don't think we go to the nickname already if they don't feel fairly good about it, but maybe so. Maybe so. I'll admit that I was wrong if that was the case. Marchie with a 5. Nobody can convince me that we would even question whatever compensation it would take to trade up for Sadiq 2 years from now. That is fair.
That's pretty much any trade in the draft. It's like 2 or 3 years down the road, either it was the worst move of all time if it didn't work out, and why did you do that? You're a bunch of idiots. And if it's a great move, people usually don't even talk about it, right? They don't even usually mention that they traded up and made that move. Because even with Cooper DeJean, I feel like you just hear that the Eagles drafted him, but nobody ever talks about like the compensation that they gave up to move up because he was such a phenomenal player, right? So if it's a great move, I feel like you won't really hear much about the trade itself. And if it's a bad move, it's going to be something that somehow ruins the franchise for years to come.
That's how it is. It's the knee-jerk reactions. We understand that. Darth with a 5. Yes, Howie hasn't said we won't trade AJ, but Cleveland said they're not trading Miles yet. Reports still coming out of Cleveland could deal him. Go Birds. I mean, yes, you're fine. There's outliers. There's reports on both sides that happen every single year. So, but it's, I don't know. From the reporting side, some GMs that will say, Howie tends to do business though of like not really dealing in absolutes because only Siths do, for you Star Wars people. But not dealing in absolutes because by doing that, I think that, and some GMs will, right? Like some GMs are going to go out there, they will say, we're not trading him. There's no way we're trading him. And all of a sudden it's like, well, a week later, what happened? Very interesting. But I appreciate that Howie, he will usually, he's not going to go so far to the extreme. And I think that's why he's doing it with AJ Brown, because he's like, look, I can't guarantee for sure. Maybe AJ is here. Maybe he's not. But he's not going to say like 100%, we're not going to trade AJ Brown, because his word means something. So if he says that publicly in a press conference when he's asked about that, and then he has to go back and say, yeah, well, but whatever. It's like, it means a lot to us as fans, sure. But I think for him, it's business with players and agents. Like players and agents that see and hear him talk, if they know all the time that what he says publicly, sure, it's more important for them to get their deals done behind the scenes, but what he says publicly actually holds some value. Like, hey, he never promised he wasn't going to trade, or he never promised he wasn't going to get this deal done or something like that. Then he sticks to it. And that means a little bit more for certainly players that can go like, yeah, they're talking about like, this was never going to happen. They get a text from some random person that tells them they're traded. They don't even hear from their GM sometimes. Like, that's legit stuff that happens across the league. But Howie does things differently, and it's why a lot of players, a lot of agents want to come to Philadelphia. It's got a better reputation, and understandably so.
Yeah, it just goes to show, because you see all the players that have left Philadelphia, whether it's trade or being cut or whatever the case might be, you very rarely hear of players specifically like bad mouthing Howie Roseman and how he handled certain situations, right? Usually it's the complete opposite. And that's why I think he's able to deal with all of these high powered agents, like Rosenhaus and these others, where some other people can't really deal with that. Sometimes those agents don't even want to deal with those GMs because it's just not worth their time. Where with Howie Roseman, he's very strategic with what he says, which is basically more so what he doesn't say, right? Because he's able to toe that line and not give you anything. And he's handled this AJ Brown situation very well, because I feel like at the start he was very complimentary of AJ, and then like as the questions kept coming, he realized like, listen, this story's not going anywhere. Why am I going to waste so much time with it? Where he's just kept it to AJ Brown's an Eagle, because if you say anything anywhere else, it's going to be twisted or like misconstrued. Even if he came out like you mentioned and said he's not getting traded, then that could always come back to bite him. So he's very strategic with what he says, and it's only a matter of time before we figure out what will actually happen with AJ Brown.
There you go. Ant Gio with the 2. Appreciate that. McKee and 23 to Miami for pick 11, and then get Sadiq. So trying to move
the Eagles
up with
would love
a
that.
big swing for McKee. That's a lot of value in Tanner McKee. Go from 23 Tanner McKee. They obviously something happened to Malik Willis. They saw him throw a football or like go over some. I don't know. Like they just buyer's remorse. It's instantly like, oh my gosh, this is not going to work. We got to get somebody else. Kevin Patullo getting in Jeff Hafley. We got to get that Tanner guy. We trade for Tanner. Maybe
they're copying the Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix situation.
That's what they're doing. Yes,
Atlanta went with.
Please take Tanner. If they somehow did that, man, good luck Tanner. Good luck Kevin Patullo. Maybe that's the last favor. Big Dom calling him in like, this is the one. You got to cash in on this, right? We didn't totally ruin your career. You were able to land somewhere in Miami. Trent with a 2. Rest in piss dirty Dianna. Screw Vrabel's 2. There you go. It's not. It's really never going to go away. Yep. It's not a surprise either. Cranky Cletus with a 5. Don't waste prime Saquon. Draft Vega. Go Birds. If he's available. I don't know that he, again, that's another one. I guess you could potentially try to trade, but I don't think that's a drastic trade up there to try to go get that. If he's somehow falling at that point, they have met with Vega as one of the 30 visits. Yeah, maybe offensive line. There are some other visits as we're getting close to wrapping up here, but some other 30 visits we have not covered as of the most recent other recording that maybe we should go over as far as at least one of those being an offensive lineman.
Yeah. So real quick, Chase Pasantis from Texas A&M was kind of the next big guard prospect that they brought in outside of Venga. So just guys that you would think, Venga would be a massive trade up, I would assume, because it seems like his range starts around 14 or so. So I think trading up that high for a guard who still isn't like a flawless prospect, like he's clearly the best guard in this class, but I don't think he's like the best guard that we've seen in years. So that would be a little bit of a reach, in my opinion. If he falls closer to 23, I can kind of get into that kind of conversation there, but a massive trade up for a guard, I'm out on that. And then Bauer Sharp, tight end from LSU, is kind of like another Johnny Munt, where he's probably going to make his like way in the NFL as a blocker. Like he doesn't offer too much as a pass catcher. And then their local visit, their local pro day, is tomorrow. So if anybody doesn't know about that, the Eagles will be having the local prospects, usually Temple, schools like that, they'll bring in or players that grew up close to the facility. So that's the biggest name that's been reported to attend their local pro day is Penn State running back Nick Singleton. So he's right around projected to be like a early day 3 running back. So who knows if they'll make an investment at running back. But on day 3, when Howie Roseman goes in that mode where he's like, listen, can this guy be a Pro Bowler? And they don't really care about need or certain positions at that point. Singleton is a player that they've met with before throughout the process, and now he'll be at the facility as well tomorrow.
There we go. Several other names. Sure, you'll see those reports. Everything else as well. Make sure to follow the man himself at DiBona NFL. Feel free to give my page a follow as well. A little bit behind on Anthony's, but Anthony's pumping out insane stats, references, and everything else on X. quite a bit more than I am. But
Maybe
the
too much.
PHI special, if you want to give me a follow on X. There's also a link for TikTok, by the way. That's kind of getting that one started up, but trying to post some more TikTok reels and everything else. So give that one a shout. Last super chat, I believe, here at the buzzer before wrapping up. Supreme, what's up with a 5? Thank you for that. Do you guys think Byron Young will have a similar role like this previous year, or do they draft a defensive tackle with one of the first 4 picks? Hashtag Mississippi, hashtag Go Birds.
Hopefully not. I think they would probably prefer that Ty Robinson kind of takes a step forward and takes over that role, but as like the 4th interior defensive lineman. But they haven't shown a ton of interest in like interior defensive lineman prospects as far as like all the meetings that I've tracked in the PhillySpecialShow.com as well, which is I think probably approaching 160 or 170 players. Not a ton of work along the interior of the defensive line. So, if the value makes sense, I could see it happening within one of those first 4 picks, but I feel like there's going to be somebody better that they're going to have a little bit higher rated at a position of need.
There you go. It's always taking the best player available. So like you said, if that person is there, then they would. It will be an athlete. So it could guarantee that, as Anthony proved that in one of the latest articles. The relative athletic score is certainly a big, important factor. And by the way, we have some very exciting more content coming as well, but some more content as far as draft coverage, kind of like a draft guide, if you will. I don't know what we necessarily covered it or titled it, but just kind of a little tease out there. So Anthony's got some really good stuff, written work, and I'm prepping kind of a combo of the video that'll be right before, maybe like 3 or 4 days. That's the plan anyway. So stay tuned for that. But we'll call it like a survivor's guide to an Eagles draft. I don't know. We're thinking through the names of this thing, but it'll be out there to cover all the realistic prospects, or maybe the most engaging ones for the Eagles, certainly based off of 30 visits and everything else. So more things to come, but appreciate you guys as always. Make sure to drop a like on your way out, stay subscribed, keep those notifications on, and we will see you next time. As always, go Birds.
Go Birds.